Welcome to another episode of our video series of the mechanics of human cognition.
It's great to be here. I feel like this week we're hitting a topic that's it's constantly on everyone's mind.
Oh, absolutely, nutrition.
But it's always shrouded in so much confusion. We get bombarded with information, and so much of it just conflicts.
It's a modern quest, isn't it? The search for the perfect diet. But the advice, it seems to change every 6 months.
It does.
So our mission today is, I think, a bit different. We're going to ignore the fads. We're going to look at the fundamental biological operating system.
The deep hardware, yeah. How the human body actually processes fuel.
We have to pull this out of the cultural conversation and ground it purely in biological reality.
And the moment you do that, you see something fascinating. There was never one single ancestral diet.
Right.
Human groups were.
Right.
They were all so different, heterogeneous, adapting to wildly different environments, sometimes even interbreeding.
Which explains the diverse physiologies we see today.
Exactly. But what's crucial is understanding the conditions that forge that hardware. We were, hunter-gatherers. But the research points to a really complex early period.
The semi-aquatic ancestor theory.
Yes, if you look at just the physiology, it makes a lot of sense.
The need for omega-3s and 6s, for instance.
Why do we have such a profound need for them? They're hard to synthesize, but they're readily available in marine life.
And our relative hairlessness, our body structure, it has similarities to marine mammals.
It does. It suggests an adaptation for water. So whether we were by the sea or on the plains, the overarching theme was always the same.
Scarcity.
Scarcity. Diets were meat and vegetable heavy, but intake was chaotic, unpredictable.
And that evolutionary context, that's what creates the crisis we're in today.
It's the whole problem. Humans are unique. We are the only animal that creates and selects food purely for pleasure.
We engineer the open buffet, the constant supply of the most delicious, calorie-dense foods.
Something that just doesn't exist in nature, and that's the ultimate paradox.
A species optimized for famine.
Drowning in continuous abundance. The body is geared entirely towards storing energy to survive droughts.
And when you introduce constant excessive intake, the whole system breaks down.
The whole thing. And we have to emphasize, the issue isn't that, say, wheat is toxic or greens are perfect.
Not the specific food.
It's the ability to consume any calorie-rich food continuously. That's what causes systemic failure.
Okay, so let's define what we mean by systemic failure. Let's talk about the core function, metabolism.
Right. Metabolism is, simply put, the sum of all chemical processes that maintain life.
And it has two vital branches.
It does. First, there's anabolism. That's the building, the growth, the synthesis phase.
Dominant when we're young, up through middle age.
Exactly. And the second is catabolism. That's the process of breaking down, of decay, cellular turnover.
Which increases dramatically after middle age. It's what we see as aging.
And this highlights something that's, wow, it's almost always ignored.
The diet of a 5-year-old who's in that high anabolism phase
Cannot possibly be appropriate for a 75-year-old whose body is deep into catabolism. It's a biological mismatch.
The older body needs less fuel and very different nutrients.
It needs support for repair, not growth. And that brings us to the core evolutionary rule.
Which is?
The body's hardware is designed to interpret hunger, or caloric restriction, as a beneficial signal.
Which is so counterintuitive. Hunger is unpleasant. It's coded that way.
It's unpleasant, but it's a necessary, integral part of daily biological life. Our ancestors were selected because they benefited from periods of restriction.
So when the body enters that state of mild restriction, and we're not talking about starvation here.
No, not at all. Just eating a bit less than you need. When that happens, it triggers systemic cellular cleanup. Repair mechanisms kick in.
This is a huge realization, especially when you look at longevity research.
It is. Calorie restriction is the only medically known method that consistently extends lifespan.
Across all species tested, right?
Mice, horses, monkeys, humans, it's universal. Eating less is the single proven key to extending both lifespan and health span.
It forces the body to clean house.
To prioritize efficiency over just immediate storage.
So if eating less is the secret, why is our instinct to eat constantly? Why do we feel so dependent on certain foods?
Now we get to macronutrients, specifically carbohydrates. Sugars.
They're the fastest energy source.
They burn like straw. You get this rapid burst of ATP energy, but it comes at a cost.
They crash.
The rapid energy dips and rises. This forces dependence. It creates that feeling of I can't feel full without bread or a sweet dessert.
And yet we're built for the opposite. We're the fattiest primate designed to carry huge stores of energy.
For when the hunt fails, we are optimized for storage. Our bodies are perfectly capable of burning that fat for slow, sustained energy.
But there's a metabolic block.
There is. Continuous daily intake of carbohydrates effectively shuts down the entire fat-burning pathway.
How does that happen on a biochemical level?
Well, when you eat carbs, your body releases insulin. Insulin's job is to get glucose out of the bloodstream.
So it prioritizes using that sugar.
It prioritizes it, and it stores any excess. But as long as insulin is active, it simultaneously blocks the enzymes needed to release and burn stored fat.
So the body literally forgets how to use its own fuel tank.
It forgets, because it's always being fed the quick-burning stuff.
That explains the horrible adjustment period when people cut carbs, the headaches, the fogginess.
That's not a sign the diet is wrong. That's the body frantically rebooting a dormant metabolic pathway.
The fat-burning pathway.
Exactly. And once that transition is done, maybe after 8 or 10 days, you shift to this sustained fat-derived energy. And the cravings they disappear.
So the core rule is allowing for restriction to keep the hardware working. But what about the quality of the fuel? Let's talk processed foods.
Okay, so when we say processed food, we mean food that's chemically altered to extend its shelf life.
Food spoils because bacteria consume it.
Right, so to stop that, manufacturers add preservatives. Things like nitrates and nitrites in cured meats. These chemicals kill bacteria.
And the problem is we, the consumer, we end up bearing the biological cost of that preservation.
Yes. The body has to deal with those chemicals. They offer very little nutritional value, and they cause a lot of internal strain.
This brings us to the whole fat debate. For decades, cholesterol was the villain.
Such a mistake. Cholesterol is anything but a villain. It's vital.
For structure.
For the structure of every single cell. The cell membrane, which is like the brain of the cell, is made of fat. Without cholesterol, our cells would collapse. The real villains are trans fats.
And what are they chemically?
They're what we call stereoisomers. Think of it like a molecule that's a mirror image of what it should be, like a left-handed glove on a right hand.
So the body's enzymes can't process them.
They can't metabolize them effectively. You find them everywhere in liquid oils, especially when they're used for deep frying over and over.
And the consequence of eating these malformed fats is vascular inflammation.
Yes. They accumulate in organs and cause inflammation in the vascular system. That is the foundational trigger for arteriosclerosis.
Hardening of the arteries.
And here's one of the most surprising facts. Only 2 groups of living beings suffer from widespread arteriosclerosis.
Humans and pigs.
That's right, which points overwhelmingly to overconsumption of specific types of food as the root cause. This is not a natural condition in the animal kingdom.
It's a byproduct of a modern, unnaturally abundant diet. Let's touch on another part of that. Refined sugar.
This is just intensely concentrated glucose, stripped from its source.
Let's use honey as an example.
Honey is one of nature's purest forms of glucose. It's incredibly healthy if our ancestors found a hive every few months and had a little.
But having that same concentrated sugar every single day.
It's essentially sugar poisoning. Or look at dates, Herma. They were a survival food for desert crossings.
A calorie-dense lifesaver.
But today, with unlimited access, they just become a high-sugar bomb. The rule holds for everything. Anything consumed too constantly or in excess becomes harmful.
Okay, let's shift from what we eat to who we host. The internal empire, the gut microbiome.
Yes. We host about 100 times more bacterial cells than our own human cells.
And its importance to health, mood, weight, it can't be overstated.
It can't. These prokaryotic cells form these complex chemical factories that directly influence how we feel. But we have to be careful not to see it as the only solution, which is the current trend.
What's really striking here is the idea of behavioral parasitism.
Yeah.
That these organisms can manipulate our cravings.
They absolutely can. Imagine gut organisms that are used to a diet of refined sugar when you deny them their fuel.
They stage an internal mutiny.
A janissary uprising, as we sometimes call it. They release stress chemicals.
And our body interprets those chemicals as anxiety, discomfort, and a powerful craving for
baklava, or whatever their preferred fuel is. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? Tiny organisms dictating your cravings.
It's a powerful, vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And we actually learned how to manage this from observing animals.
We did. The insight that led to fecal transplantation came from elephants. A distressed elephant would eat the feces of a healthy one, and its mood would improve.
A shift in the microbial population shifted its behavior.
Exactly. Of course, modern science uses highly controlled, washed bacterial content, but the principle is the same.
So, on a practical level, how do we improve our own flora?
Well, beyond prebiotics and probiotics, avoiding processed foods, the crucial mechanism is intermittent fasting.
Being hungry for 16 to 18 hours.
That period allows the small intestine to initiate its essential housekeeping wave. It's a sweeping action that cleans the gut.
And consistency is key here.
It's everything, because the bad bacteria multiply much faster than the beneficial ones. One cheat day can set you back quite a bit. It requires sustained effort.
Finally, let's connect all of this to the brain, the control center with unique energy needs.
The brain is incredibly expensive, metabolically speaking. Its #1 priority is a stable, constant flow of energy.
It's why pressing on the neck arteries causes you to faint, an evolutionary reflex.
Forces the body horizontal to get blood flow back to the brain immediately.
So if sugar is fast, volatile energy.
Hmm.
What's the optimal fuel for sustained cognitive performance?
That would be ketone bodies.
Produced from fat when carbs are restricted.
Right. Ketones are an incredibly efficient and, more importantly, stable fuel source. They bypass the whole insulin roller coaster, providing reliable focus for hours.
So a low-carb, high-fat diet with intermittent fasting is basically optimizing the fuel source for the brain.
It's creating a state of metabolic flexibility. And this state directly impacts our restorative processes, especially sleep.
Sleep quality and duration aren't fixed, are they?
Not at all. They're controlled by a trio of fundamental variables.
And those are?
1, the amount of calories you consume.
Yeah.
2, your stress level.
Huh.
And 3, your level of physical activity.
So if you're sleeping poorly, don't just try to sleep longer. Look at those 3 things.
Exactly. If you eat a huge meal before bed, your body is working on digestion, not deep restorative sleep. If you're stressed, the hormones will inhibit deep sleep.
So you manage the inputs and the sleep self-corrects.
Address those 3 things, and your sleep quality and duration will naturally regulate. Don't manipulate the output, fix the inputs.
That brings us full circle. The key is distinguishing between a real physical need and a food addiction or a bacterial craving.
And we suggest a simple test for this. The immediate feedback test. Try eating single-item meals, just one type of vegetable or a piece of protein.
And then you wait.
You wait about 90 to 120 minutes, and you monitor your energy level.
If you feel energized, focused, alert, that was good fuel for your system.
But if, 90 minutes later, you feel groggy, tired, mentally sluggish, that heavy feeling,
That's your body giving you reliable feedback. Avoid that food.
it overloaded your system. So we've established that our biology is fundamentally adapted to seasonal, limited, chaotic consumption. That was the natural barrier.
And that leads to a final, pretty provocative thought.
I think so.
Yeah.
We have to leave you with this question. How does our current globalized agricultural model, which prioritizes 24/7 availability of everything,
Which forces continuous metabolic stress on us.
how does that fundamentally conflict with the deep mechanics of our biological design?
It forces us to act against our factory settings every single day. Thank you for walking us through these core mechanics.
My pleasure. We'll look forward to the next one.